Okay.
Right. So welcome to the PCC Forum, all of you who are here with us now and those of you who will see us later. This is the first one of the 2021 season, so we're going to be in for another ride here. I want to just kind of introduce Sammy, who is a pretty new face to me, I gotta say. But we hung out a little bit after the PCC party last week, and it's been a lot of fun getting to talk with you, Sammy, in a couple of conversations since then. For those of you who don't know, Sammy has a bachelor's degree in religion from Oberlin College and a master's degree in contemplative psychotherapy from Naropa University. Currently a doctoral student in the East-West Psychology program at CIIS, and at Oberlin, Sammy had the privilege of studying with James Winston Morris, a teacher on Islamic thought and Sufism, and a leader of Ibn Arabi, and a leading Ibn Arabi scholar. He then went on to try to translate the mystical insights he gleaned from his undergraduate studies into practical ways of being of help to himself and to others by pursuing training in psychotherapy. And as a therapist practicing in Pakistan, Sammy discovered his work had become akin to a firefighter trying to put out small fires in his sessions with clients while an inferno raged all around. This is why I gotta read this bio here. It was then that Sammy decided to focus his attention on the inferno and started exploring in earnest the collective psyche. And so this is the work he's been fortunate to pursue as a student at CIIS and is going to be sharing with us today. So Sammy, if you want to elaborate on any of that, we'd be happy to hear. Otherwise, you can launch into the presentation. And the way this usually works, just because there are new people here, is what we usually do is, and let us know, Sammy, what you're going to be doing if this diverges, but usually hang out for an hour, listening to the speaker, half an hour, hour and a half, what have you. We're here for 2 hours. At some point, questions and answers, we'll get into it. And yeah, just looking forward to hearing some insight. So there you go, Sammy.
Okay. Thanks so much, Matt. I mean, you guys have just held me from the beginning, and I really appreciate it for all your encouragement. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really don't know what shape this is going to take. I struggled a lot trying to get together a slide presentation, which I haven't really done a lot of, and certainly haven't done it in a very long time. And what I discovered was that trying to communicate what I really want to communicate was proving very difficult in the form of slides and just trying to get these concepts out. But so I've really agonized over what approach to take, and my instinct has been just to speak from my heart, because it's all in me. I've spoken to so many people about this, and every time it seems to come out just fine. And so I'm hoping that it comes out okay now as well. But yeah, I want to say that I feel totally kind of, I don't know, this is just, it's been 21 years of holding a lot of this stuff in, and sort of letting it out in sort of piecemeal. And so this is, I think, my first real opportunity to kind of present a more cohesive, comprehensive as I can, and to obviously, answer questions. And, what I actually really want to do is not take up too much time with a presentation, but sort of present a few ideas and then open it up for discussion and Q&A. yeah, so we'll see how it goes. And thank you for your patience and just bearing with me. So I do have a slide, a presentation that I think I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Share screen. There we go. Okay. Now, how do I make this full screen? Because I think, here we go. I think we can go here.
And then you can hit presenter view probably.
No.
No. You can, if you go back, I think you can hit the, what is it? Play from current slide, play from start. There it is.
There we go.
Perfect.
So is that, do you see it full?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. How does this go forward? Okay, just click. Okay. So, as I'm sure most of you know, before beginning anything, you say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is, in the name of God, the All Merciful, the Ever Merciful. Both these names share the same trilateral root, RHM, which means caring and mercy. I guess for those not familiar, this is a constant, this is how each verse or each surah of the Quran begins. So, there's a constant, and then of course the names of All Merciful, All Compassionate, the Ever Merciful, these appear many, many times in the Quran, in the surahs themselves. So there's a constant emphasis on, God's compassion and God's mercy. The way to distinguish between these two terms is All Merciful is kind of a general sort of compassion that's sort of inherent in just the creative act, so everything is done with compassion, and so everything bears the stamp of compassion. And then the Ever Merciful is more specific, so it's compassion, mercy that is applicable and relevant to specific situations. It's not a generalized kind of compassion. So, okay, so with that beginning, the whole idea of this, topic is that, I guess say it out first, how, like a lot of the mystics, in fact, all the mystics have tried to view existence in terms of this compassion, so how can we view everything that's happened, everything that happens, everything that we've experienced from that place of divine love, even when obviously things don't feel loving and things are not easy by any means. How can we still sort of maybe come back to the idea that it was still rooted in compassion, whatever was happening. So let's see. Yeah, one of them, the main thing, the reason for this talk is because for a long time I've been following things that have happened in my life, things that have, been happening in the world, and trying to see things through this perspective. And it's at least become clear to me, even though I feel completely ravaged right now, I feel totally, well, that's separate from the idea that everything is an encounter with God, ultimately. And if God is conceived of as ultimate love, then everything that we experience in life is an encounter with love, and that's the great challenge, I suppose. But that's what the mystics have always been able to do, is that I think they've always been able to come back to this idea that, and not to the idea, but to the experience that everything that they've encountered is an encounter with divine love. And in that way, the mystic never is or feels separated from God, you know. So if you make everything out to be God, then you're always with God. And that's the main point, because separation is just too painful. So, you know, a mystic lover is willing to admit, you know, that a very painful experience is still God, because the feeling of knowing or the recognition that that is God still is a balm, you know, even though the experience may be very painful. And that's, you know, that's, I think, what gives rise to all the poetry that we have been blessed with, you know, Hafez, Rumi, Sadi, you know, you name it, and all the philosophers and, you know, yeah. So I guess, you know, because I'm so nervous right now, I need to sort of settle my mind a little bit. I'm just going to read something that I wrote a few years ago, and maybe that'll just kind of help me out. So,
Sammy, you're doing great.
thank you, Matt. Thank you. I appreciate that. So you know, I don't see anyone. Do you see my screen still?
Yeah, we see the presenter's view, so we can see the little stuff in the side. But it's great. You know, we can see the slides.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay. So let me just read out a little bit, and then, you know, we can move forward. So love as a concept is easy to indicate or refer to, but the experience of love is as vast and varied as the universe itself. The focus of my inquiry is divine love. What is it? How does it manifest in the world at large and in individual experience? How do individuals receive divine love? What obstructs this process and what can facilitate it? A set of working assumptions I make at the outset includes the idea of the reality of divine love, the fact that it is a phenomenon that can be experienced directly, relationally, and that the more it can be consciously received by individuals, the more expanded is its conduit for expression in the world. I want to be careful about not restricting the activity of divine love with my own limited comprehension of it. In the deepest sense, I understand divine love to be the force behind everything that happens in this world. So it already has all the conduits it needs for its expression. Thus, it is appropriate to suggest that divine love takes many forms, and that in order to have more expressions in this world of the forms that exhibit gentleness, compassion, beauty, generosity, and overwhelming care, to name just a select few, would require more individuals who are capable of receiving such attributes and then passing them on. And so, although another working assumption is that the experience of divine love is expanded by the participation of individuals in conscious engagement with it, human beings are not the only conduit of divine love. You know, I mean, animals and plants and nature and spiritual beings. So if it is safe to assume that all beings have a yearning to feel love, and if this love brings with it a sense of wondrous connection to all other beings, then it must have a locus beyond while fully embracing limited individual consciousness. I think that's Tara Bliss, unmuted, or?
No, I got it. It was somebody else.
Oh, okay.
Just, Sammy, are you reading, is this a quote on the slide?
No, it's not.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, this is just something. I mean, this is just a little more, you know. So, and then I will move on to the slideshow. Okay. Why is it hard for you to track it?
No. I because there's a block quote in the next slide. I didn't know if that was the one. So I can anyway. So it's great. Keep going.
Okay. So this is the love that the Sufis are writing about in terms of divine love. This is the love that wants to be known. This is the love that pervades creation and all moments of existence because it wants to be known. And this is the love that can never go away, even though it might feel absent, sometimes for protracted periods. It is always working from behind the veil, and from time to time, it shows itself through a more obvious gesture, something that we have come to recognize as grace. This is the love that one can participate in by viewing everything that happens to us and everything that we witness as different expressions, shades, moods, variations, and gestures of this ultimate source, all fashioned with the utmost loving attention and detail to bring about our fulfillment by helping us to return to it in consciousness. Therefore, attention to the situations and moments when we don't experience it provide the gateway to understanding what it is up to, what it wants us to do or to learn, where it wants to steer us, and in what areas it wants us to mature and develop. Needless to say, it is an ongoing task. So I'll just stop there and then I'll move on. Just to give you a little background of what Sufism is, for those, maybe not familiar. So the Sufi, through creative expression, remembers and invokes the divine order as it resides in a hidden state within all forms. And in terms of this talk, and I guess a lot of Sufis would also agree, is that the divine order we're talking about is the divine order of divine love, because that's what resides in everything, in a hidden way. So to remember and to invoke in this sense are the same. To act on a form so that that which is within may become known. The Sufi thus reenacts the process of creation whereby the divine came to know itself. The receptacle in which the creation is reenacted may be an external form, such as an artifact, or it may be the life form of the mystic, which is transformed. Here, the very soul of the Sufi to be reaches towards the divine center through the mystic quest. So the motive of creation, is something that comes in, in the form of a hadith Qudsi, which is a tradition in which the Prophet Muhammad is speaking, but he's speaking God's words. And he says, so the Prophet Muhammad says that God said that I was a hidden treasure and I yearned to be known. And that is why I produced creatures in order to be known in them. And, I guess if you're familiar with the work of Henri Corbin, he has written, explicated on this a lot. It's just amazing. And the title of his book is Alone with the Alone, Creative Imagination in the Sufism of Ibn Arabi. And Ibn Arabi obviously also, is inspired by this and it informs his philosophy. Another mystic that we look at is Hafez, the poet from Persia, and he, let's see, here we go. So this is come to be known as his ghazal of pre-eternity. So this is prior to creation. And he says, one day in pre-eternity, a ray of your beauty shot forth in a blaze of epiphany. Then love revealed itself and cast down a fire that raised the earth from toe to crown. And again, there's so much, okay, so let me back up a little bit. So before creation, the mystics say, and it's also mentioned in the Quran, that God revealed him, her, itself, to all the creatures. And it's one of the only two times that God has revealed, him, her, itself in that way. The other being, or the other will be when all the souls are back together, post-existence, so I guess it's post-existence. So the first movement is God in God's, undifferentiated essence, which had been existing for all eternity. And then I think, either God would, I mean, there was a profound sadness because there was all this love, and there was not an other to share it with, to pour it into, to have that reflection come back, to really know that love by, the medium of the other. So there was a tremendous sadness and a tremendous aloneness in that, and a real desire to be known. And that's what gave rise to all of creation. And the movement of it is such that first there was a ray that shot out, from within that sort of undifferentiated essence. And that was what created, something other than, that essence. And then I think within that ray, there were all the potentialities then came into being, and they're, I guess, known as the divine names. And, in some accounts, I think, Sal al-Tustari talks about it, how it's like eons, that these divine names and God are with each other and just sort of taking in the other. And it's unimaginable what that was like. But the point is that we were all there because, everything is a divine name. And so each one of us is a divine name. And the way I, like to think of it, and Ibn Arabi certainly has helped, with this, is to think of it as, a director with his cast and crew. So, if you imagine God as the director, he's got all the cast and crew right there, and for eons, it's like, each glance at that ray of light produced a new character, so a new character, a new speck of light came into being. And that just kept happening, it just kept happening. And it makes sense that that's the only time that God would reveal him, her itself, because that's the only time that we were all together. So God, by definition, is the whole, together, unified in one place, before sort of taking the plunge into creation, which is basically tantamount to taking the plunge into production mode, where the cameras come on and, it's time for action, which is what this world is, it's where all the action happens. But all the mystics and all the philosophers, especially in Sufism, Islam, those inclined, they say that, remembering that event, prior to creation, is what really helps to center us and to remind us that, there's a reason why we're here. It's based in love, it comes from love, and it's going to return to love. This is not, this is not, a production without a certain kind of maybe design, and the design is that, the return is guaranteed for all, right? What would be the point otherwise, and so, I've come to look at it as, you go out, and when you remember, what the whole purpose is, then that's when you really start to turn, and you start to make your way back in terms of just consciousness. And so, there are two poles. One pole is God, which is right at the beginning. And then the other pole is the in-between point, what I call the limit in this diagram over here. this region right here, the limit. And the limit, that's where man is, human being is the pole. So, um, uh, and just as, something initiated the movement of descent into creation, something has to happen at this limit that has to initiate the process of ascent back to origin. Um, and Anyway, I mean, for those of you who haven't seen this diagram, I just kind of realized recently, as I was trying to get this presentation together, that and reading stuff that I've read in the past, but it had been a while, that all of this kind of is me putting together what I've read. It doesn't just come out of my my head or whatever. It's all there, and I've sort of put it together. I don't know who's that, but anyway. Oh, Sean, hi. It's good to see you here. So yeah, I've sort of put a few things together. And if anyone has any questions about this, we can obviously go over that, in the discussion. So if you consider this, the origin, source, primordial, past, this is where the event, which is known as the Day of the Covenant, when God had, all the souls, everything that was ever going to be created, right there. And there was this ray of beauty. And of course, we were dazzled by the beauty of the beloved, of which we were a part. We are a part. But at that time, we were all in one place. And so, in the Quran, it says, God said, to all of us and to all of the souls, am I not your Lord? And everyone was in agreement and said yes. And what that means is, the mystics and the philosophers say that was a pact of love, because there was overwhelming, unimaginable beauty, like the divine hidden treasure was in full view. And we would need something like that, you see, because going into creation is going into separation from that, which is hard, which is the hardest thing that anyone can ever imagine. But that's exactly what we did. And I mean, the way I look at it is, like if you're if you're unified, if you're in union with that, or with for eons, then the only way to really enjoy it again is to go out on an adventure where you forget that. But it's an adventure within your own being. It's not an ordinary adventure. It's an adventure of willingly becoming unconscious, willingly taking on pain and suffering, but knowing, at the outset, even though we forget later, that we're going to be back, because there's nowhere else for us to go, right? There is nothing else except for this love and this beauty. So that's the arc of descent, and in that arc of descent, because we have to go out, darkness dominates over light, secrecy over revelation, etc., with all pairs of opposites, or pairs of complementary opposites. Because another important idea is that these opposites are not really against each other, but they kind of instigate each other. They set each other off. Like anytime you go too far in one, it activates the other, and so on. It's like a dance, and it needs the other to do that. So I mean, I had the idea that because you have to go this maximum distance away from source, then darkness must obviously be dominating over light in some way, and so on, like secrecy dominating over revelation, etc. And then when something happens at this limit, that kind of flips the polarity, so that light now dominates over darkness, and it gets us back to the origin. Now, I guess another thing I want to say about this is, this is something that we enact unconsciously. I mean, generally, I mean, I guess largely unconsciously. We obviously have moments of consciousness and remembrance and all of that, but generally as a collective, it feels right like it's a thing careening out of control. It's sort of just like, and people can't help but enact this whole thing. And so if you look at that trajectory and you're sort of looking straight into the abyss. And that's, very ripe to project your fears and hopes onto, right? I mean, that's what we do. But if we remember where it came from and what the whole thing is all about, then that can help us make that turn, So I guess that's all I'm going to say for now about that. And then we can, come back to it. Okay, so that's done. Now, this is Hafez again. He says, "Thou hast set the treasure of love in our ravaged heart. Thou hast thrown the shadow of fortune over the ruined corner." So we are in the ruined corner, but he's also thrown the shadow of fortune over it. The Lord of pre-eternity offers us the treasure of sorrow that we may descend into this ravaged dwelling. So yeah, I mean, he's basically trying to help us understand that, this was always meant to be a very sorrowful journey, this part of it, right? Because there was, I mean, that's the ride we signed up for. That's, that's what, yeah, I mean, that's what we've done. But, it's not for nothing, you see, because the real fun of it is now on the arc of ascent back, and recognizing the hidden divinity in everything, I mean, if you can just imagine what it would be like to see, the most unsavory characters that you can ever imagine, and that, and we experience, how each one of us, is destined for that kind of reunion with the beloved. I mean, it's just it's but it's also, it's not entirely easy to navigate, as we know. And it's hard, to say the least. It's just, but I mean, I guess that's why I've been just wanting to bring this out more. I mean, it's been coming out more and more, but I feel like the dominant discourse is all about division. It's all about, this one is wrong and this one did that, and, I'm no good, or this one's no good, and are we going to make it, or are we not going to make it? I mean, it's hard to hear that, when there's this possibility of really holding space, for that divinity to show itself to us in each form. And if we don't hold space for that, then we'll never get to see it, right? I mean, but I don't believe that that's the case, but I'm just saying that one has to hold space for something in order for it to kind of emerge. Okay, let's see. Right, so from the dawn of the first beginning till the twilight of the last end, friendship and love have drawn inspiration from one soul pact, one single trust. Now, also, you might think, why? I mean, we obviously know what kind of time period we're in. You know, we all feel it. And this, the breadth of the compassionate. So, you know, in the traditions, you know, I think a lot of traditions have this, that creation is a result of God's breathing, right? It's a compassionate breath. And there's the exhale that, you know, brings all the forms into manifest phenomenal existence. And then there's the inhale that brings it all back. And so I guess, yeah, I mean, I don't need to read all of this, but yeah, the diagram, going back to the diagram again, the limit, right? Why do I think that we're in the region of that limit, and that, you know, the process of ascent, you know, God willing, is upon us? Because, you know, look at what's happening right now in terms of breathing and the breath. It, you know, I can't breathe, you know, that's been huge. The whole thing about wearing masks and this virus that attacks the lungs, you know, it has to do with breathing. So we are being suffocated, you know, and we're dying because of it. And it, you know, on all levels, not just physical death, all kinds of deaths are happening. And so, I mean, something's got to give, you know, some kind of like reprieve, or something more than that. I mean, it's just, you know, it's like, I mean, it's wanting to be I don't want to say born, but it's wanting to come in, you know, and give us that, you know, relief, at least initially. And then, you know, I think it just builds and builds and builds. And I think the whole process of ascent is tracing our entire soul history, you know. So that's how I think of heaven, is just tracing the soul's history, all that we've done in the arc of descent, you know, all the things that we have experienced that we've completely forgotten, are invisible webs of connection with everything. You know, when all of that starts to become known, and you know, we can, that's fun. That's like enjoying the fruits of your labor. And I think that's what the arc of ascent is all about. So let's see. Okay, so this, you know, is something that Debashish had pointed me to, you know, which is in the Isha Upanishad, which is that the breath of things is an immortal life, but of this body, ashes are the end. Om, O will, remember that which was done, remember. O will, remember that which was done, remember. So, you know, this is just to say that this is another instance of, you know, like encouraging us to remember the covenant, right? What happened before. So anyway, so I guess you guys get the idea now, you know, and this is Ahmad Ghazali, who wrote, I guess, the first major treatise, Persian treatise on love. And he, you know, he I mean, it's a mix of poetry and prose. And he basically really talks about how difficult it is, and how it just completely ravages your heart. And so he says, it happens quite frequently that love covers its face, avoiding a morose display, and pain makes its appearance, because love is a chameleon. It changes color every moment. Sometimes it says, I have gone away, when in fact it has not. Yeah, I guess, I mean, this is all along those lines. You know, it's like everything that we love in the world is a way of loving God. You know, there is nothing else. And so that's basically what Ibn Arabi is saying here. Um, and then Ahmad Ghazali saying, I have your image in my eyes so much that whatever I perceive, I think it is you. This is like total absorption, not being able to see anything but the divine beloved. And so, there's a dialectic of love that Ibn Arabi, has written about, and that Henri Corbin has also explicated. And the dialectic is that the beloved is the lover, and the lover is the beloved. So God as the beloved becomes the lover because God falls in love with the divine names, and God loves the creatures. And so then the creatures, which is us, we, I guess when we can receive that love, then we, as the beloved, we can receive that love as the beloved, then we become the lover as well, so okay, so this is also from Ibn Arabi, and it's James Morris's unpublished lectures on rediscovering the divine comedy, eschatology, and spiritual realization in Ibn Arabi. And basically Ibn Arabi is talking about how there's a kind of it's a magic screen show. This whole thing is a magic screen show where the forms are veils, and God is in the veils, and even unveiling is a veil, because unveiling doesn't, it also, it takes you from a thicker veil to a thinner veil, but it's still a veil. And I think that's important to realize, because one can very easily think that, oh, I see it now, and that's a veil as well, because the only time that we really get to see is, I think, when we're right there at the end, again, all together, fully conscious, fully unified. I think that's when we can truly see. Everything else up until then is kind of seen through a veil, and the greatest veil is the little self. Yeah. So I think that's very important to keep in mind, because one, until you get to the end, you don't want to make any hasty conclusions about anything. But again, we can follow, the intuition of the heart, and yeah, because until you get to the end, until everything has been absorbed, reabsorbed, right? You want to make sure that happens. And so, just knowing that things are always going to be veiled to some degree is very important. Yeah, and so, this reality is a pearl in the shell, and the shell is in the depths of the ocean. Knowledge can advance only as far as the seashore. How could it possibly reach the depths? I think, yeah, that points to, just knowing that no matter how convincing something might appear, it's a journey to really understand it in its complete reality, and only the heart can do that, and it's a tall order, it's just a constant I guess struggle, but hopefully it gets easier on the way to, I mean, who knows? I mean, it's difficult because there's no, like even on the arc of ascent, darkness doesn't disappear, and there's always going to be, difficulty and challenge, but because light dominates, it'll be an easier route, hopefully. So, this whole thing brings up the idea of, oh my God, it's been 48 minutes. That's a lot. Iblis and the role of Satan. There are Sufis, including Al-Ghazali and his student Ain al-Qudat. I couldn't find a quote from him, but basically saying that there is no possibility of Satan, Iblis rising up in defiance, of God, because Satan, Iblis is part of God and provides a useful, important function, which is to get us maximum distance, out, which is what was the requirement of the director. So that's how they see it. And that's, I think, a good way of seeing that, because, one can only, I guess, even begin to fathom the vastness of divine love if, one can see a redemptive role for, some being that we think is, the worst of everything. So, the Sufis who say, well, Satan, Iblis is the greatest monotheist, because he refused to bow down to anything but God. Again, this is not to suggest that negative actions should be condoned or should be encouraged, because of obviously everything is just fine. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what they're saying either. But again, not making anything out to be the devil, right, would be a good starting point. And the biggest devil is always within. And that's what we always, I think, need to remember. And in my experience, I mean, my God, I have incredible, crazy thoughts all the time. Thankfully less now, but I've had a lot of them, and they're always there. And the function they serve, they say that those are the whisperings of Satan. The function it serves is, it makes me want to turn towards God even more, and that's an essential part of this whole turning, is Toba, and which is tshuva in Judaism. It's the same thing. It's a turning away from what is what we know to be, negative and something that causes pain and suffering, and something that's rooted in division and whatever, and turning away from that and turning towards the beautiful and, the loving and the generous and all of that. So again, it provides a very useful function. And that's why it exists. A lot of people think, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Why do I have these crazy thoughts? And it's not that. It's actually there as, as an aid. So, okay. Okay. My God, this has gone on for too long. I don't want to be speaking so much. So I'm just going to go through these very quickly. So this is, something from the Buddhist tradition, story about a magician's home, where a man goes to a magician's home, drinks a cup of tea, and, gets under a spell, and he rides his horse to the end of the world where there's a great ocean. And he can't go any further. He meets a beautiful woman whom he marries, has children, lives with her happily, falls upon bad times, driven to despair, throws himself into the ocean. At that point, the effect of the spell wears off, and he finds himself back at the magician's home. Okay, and very little time has passed. And that is something that I just found in the Quran as well, that, this God says that it'll be as if it's, this whole journey will be as if it was just an afternoon. It's just like no time has passed really, which is crazy. But anyway, I thought I'd put that in there as well. Then there are some quotations from the Quran. My mercy encompasses all things. To God belongs the east and the west. Wheresoever you turn, there's the face of God. We shall show them our signs in the horizons and in themselves till it is clear to them that it is the truth. and in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of day and night, there are signs for those with insight. So again, the Quran also talks about alternations and pairs, like everything's created in pairs, complementary pairs. So again, I'll just leave this here so that people, later when you're watching it, the slides are there, but I don't want to spend too much time, going over them. This thing, I added this quote at the end about the great catastrophe, because that is very much how people tend to think of, the end times or whatever, like there's, and who knows, like like whatever catastrophe needs to happen, I'm hoping it's already happened, like why do we need to go through more catastrophe? And so, yeah, I mean, I wanted to just put it out there because that's how, that people think that if you've been a good person, then you go to heaven, and if you've been a bad person, you go to hell. And the mystical view, based in divine love, says that everyone gets to heaven, right? That's the whole point. There's no hell as such. Hell is just relative distance from the source. And at any point in this whole movement, the diagram that I made, one can always be in paradise or hell, just depending on where we're at any given time. Okay, don't have time to go into this either, but this is just about Sal Tustari talking about how there are multiple meanings in each verse of the Quran. There's the literal, there's the hidden, there's the limit, so each verse also has a limit of what's lawful and unlawful by that, in that verse. And then this is the important part. The point of transcendency is the command of the heart over the meaning intended by it as understood from the vantage point of God. So there's a meaning of each verse that is understood by God, and yeah, and that's kind of a secret meaning, and it's something that we all have to discover, in each case, in each moment, I suppose, and something maybe that's discovered after the fact. So okay. Right, I wanted to mention this. So I don't know if Mark is here, but before COVID hit, my friend Mark gifted this to me. It's a piece of the Torah, and it came under just incredible circumstances. Like when he was giving it to me, I cried because I knew there was a message in there, but I didn't know what it was, and I don't think he knew which piece of the Torah he was giving me. But basically, this is from a story of Moses, with the Israelites, and they've been in the wilderness, and they're not happy because there's no water. They're thirsty, they're hungry, and they turn against God, and they turn against Moses, and then God sends a plague of fiery serpents, and then the people repent, and then ask Moses to pray for them. And then God says to Moses, make a snake and put it up on a pole. Anyone who's bitten can look at it and live. So this whole thing of a snake on a pole is the caduceus, right? It's a sign of the WHO. And I got this in December 2019, and February 2020, like that sign was everywhere. And I was like, what is going on? I mean, this is obviously significant. And I had no idea what it really meant until just a few weeks ago, when I was looking at a book that I got from my grandfather's library. Just, happened to look at it because the title of the book is Love of God. And this is the first chapter, Love in its Essence. And it says the word ishq, which is the Arabic word for love, is derived from ashika. And ashika is the creeper, called liblab in Arabic, and ishq pechan in Persian. And when this creeper twines itself around a tree, it deprives it of its leaves and fruits. The tree turns yellow, and a few days later dries up completely. So that's kind of, you know, a creeper around a piece of wood, a pole, whatever. And so similarly, when love takes its root in the heart of a lover, everyone other than the beloved is effaced in the effulgence of the beloved's beauty. The very being of the lover is annihilated, and there remains nothing save the beloved. So basically, I took that to mean, and if you look at the etymology of the word serpent, it means creeper, you know? So it's about love, and it's about, you know, maybe reminding the people that it's about, you know, the whole, like whatever's happening to them is also an act of love, right? Because if we do lose the plot, right, we have to be brought back. And what is the process of bringing us back? Like, that's painful. And so I shared this with a rabbi friend of mine recently, and he said, in the tradition, it's about the fiery serpent. Putting a serpent up on a pole is showing people what's in them, that caused, you know, the plague to come. So it's a reminder, you know. It's like, you know, and then Mark told me that it means shit, Mark, if you're here, I hope you can share. Forgot. It means, God, I forget. I'm sorry. Okay. Now, this is an image that I have that I came across like many years ago in Berkeley, looking through Chughai's paintings. Chughai is a painter from Pakistan. He's like the national painter of Pakistan was. And this is kind of done in an Art Nouveau style. It's also incorporating obviously Mughal and Persian influences, and it's just exquisite. And when I was thinking of this presentation, like this is the image that came to mind. You know, like she's holding up this jewel, which is that divine love that is wanting to be known in each form. And that is the hidden treasure, you know, that gave rise to all of creation, and to which we are, you know, destined from this perspective to return to and to be unified with. But you know, the whole idea is that we need to become conscious of it here and now, you know, in whatever ways that we can. And you know, this is, I mean, you know, the title is Dawn in the Himalayas. She's standing on top of the world, you know, the sun is rising. And, you know, it's the feminine, right? That's another thing that I haven't really mentioned. It's the feminine, because in the arc of descent, you can think of the masculine, you know, sort of dominating. And in the arc of descent, it's the feminine that dominates and brings us back. You know, so this is like a perfect image. Like she's the herald of that return, and we already feel it. You know, like, I mean, there's so much that's happening that is a clear indication that that energy is just raring to you know, be acknowledged and given space to do what it's meant to do. And then, you know, this is a beautiful quote from the Talmud, I think, you know, during the deepest, darkest night, act as if the morning has already come. And that's, I think, you know, the great blessing of the darkness is that possibility. So I guess I'll just end there for now. I hope it's made sense. I'm sorry, you know, I've just been a little rattled, but thank you for your patience. And let's see what happens now.
Awesome. Thank you, Sammy.
Yeah.
And I'll just invite everybody to use their little clappy emoji or what have you, or if anybody has any questions or comments, please either share them. We'd love to see your face, first of all, and make this as much of a community as we can. But if you are indisposed, feel free to write a little comment in the chat and what have you.
Actually, may I step in here and forgive me for not showing my face? I'm doing all kinds of things in preparation for Yuka's departure for Japan. I'm just not in a presentable mode. But first of all, thank you so much, Sami. It was real food for the soul to be reminded of, and to have the courage to speak about love. It's a hard thing to do in these times. And I love that line, the treasure of sorrow also. So many beautiful lines, and sustenance. So I just want to express my gratitude for you there. And I'm not going to be able to stay for the whole discussion. So if I may, could I pose one question to you?
Of course. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So can you say something about how in your impression from the sages and the mystics that you've been hanging out with, particularly from the Sufi tradition, how they would see the relationship between the love which is before and above all, to the call for and the passion for justice, which is also such a strong theme in the Quran, at least. The relationship between the love and forgiveness and acceptance and so on the one hand, and a passion for justice, and particularly in our world today. And anything you might say about that, I'd appreciate. And then forgive me if I leave before the whole thing ends. But
not at all, Sean. It's really nice to have you here. And that's a great question, because I feel this whole idea of justice is interesting. Like, what is justice? Like, what is it? Like, if I am fulfilled, I want everyone to be happy. I want everyone to be fulfilled. That for me is justice. If someone has wronged someone, that's hard. It's hard to forgive, especially when the wrongs have been really brutal, and but I feel like God took it upon God, us, we took it upon ourselves to go through this, and whatever we need, I believe we will get. And it's not up to me or you or anyone, I think, to determine what justice looks like. I think it gets served by virtue of God being in control of everything at all points of time. I think the more we focus on love, the more we focus on remembering the root of everything, and what sustains everything, then all questions about justice kind of maybe get resolved in that. I say that, but here's another thing I want to say is that, I was sharing this with Dan recently. Hi, Dan. So, that all the people, all these groups, that are just completely against each other, and getting further entrenched, they're kin. They're actually kin, and if they were to know what their soul histories are, then they would see that in previous lifetimes they were kin. And if they happen to be on opposite sides now, then when they wake up, then the love will be will be tremendous, because the pain has been so intense. The pain of hating, the pain of suspecting the other, the pain of division. So, you know, I think justice is love coming into consciousness. You know, that's justice. And that does things that none of us can predict. And that we, you know, if we can have that vision, if we can hold that vision, then we'll see incredible things.
Thank you for that, Sammy. It's an interesting turn on what I and others have said, that what love looks like is justice. So you're sort of turning it around. But I look forward to continuing the conversation with you at some other point. Thanks for letting me ask this question first.
Yep. Thank you.
Be well.
Thanks, Sean.
Sami, I have to be honest, I had a really shitty fucking day.
No.
And it's no problem. But I love, you know, this idea that trauma is still God. And, you know, so much of what you were saying, just hiding, you know, in the sort of daily shit. And you know, where we lose that feeling of and remembering that we are immersed in love, and where we don't feel that is sort of indicative of work needing to be done, and the crazy thought serving the function of, you know, helping us turn back to God, to love, to recognize, you know, what we're seeing outside is what is inside as well. And yeah, I guess I'm wondering though, you know, in terms of time and that idea of time as a boomerang, I wonder if you could just speak more to that, because I think so often, you know, we have this linear, you know, progression forward. But it, you know, there are sort of moments in our lives, I think, where we are forced to reflect and sort of look back at, you know, all of these things. And it seems like, you know, collectively, that's a big part of what we're doing. But maybe, I don't know, I'm wondering if you know, you came out of PCC, and this idea of time and cosmology and time as a boomerang. I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit more about that, and just see what comes up for you.
Yeah, you know, so when I was doing research for my dissertation, which I'm still doing, but you know, during COVID times, I was looking through, you know, all kinds of notions about time. I looked at Mircea Eliade, I looked at, you know, chaos, cosmos, and you know, that whole book, and eschatologies, and you know, just trying to figure out where, you know, if there are ideas about this moment that are different from what we ordinarily have heard, you know. And I came across an article on Persian ideas of time, and ideas of time in Persian Sufism by Gerhard Bowering. And in that, I saw for the first time the idea of time as a boomerang, you know, and Bowering was talking about Sal Tustari's ideas that could be conceived as that, you know, time as a boomerang. And that immediately struck me as something that was, you know, true. And then I thought about, you know, I had a brother who was born when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and he died because he was a breach. It was just at the very last moment, he did a 180, you know, and he choked, and he lived for only 8 hours. And his name was Muhammad Ali. You know, they named him, I guess, after he was, you know, after he passed away. And I'll never forget that image, just imprinted itself in my mind and heart, you know. And And after all this time, 30 plus years, when I read Time as a Boomerang, it's that image that came to my mind. Of like, what is that image? Like, how can you do a 180 at the very last minute? What is that? Why would you, like, why would that happen? And that's why I feel like, something similar could happen in this instance. Like, we could do a 180 and live, and not just live, but thrive and realize our purpose, so yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me that it would be that way, because any kind of initiation or some awakening implies a transition, and in this case, if you're careening, it's like the whole image of being pulled back from the brink. I think there's a reason why that's such a predominant image in our culture, being pulled back from the brink. Like, what is that? Why does it exist? Why is it there? I think it's to have, to kind of let us know in some kind of subconscious subliminal level that, that's kind of what we're part of. Does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, I mean, like, as you're talking, I mean, I just, first of all, your presentation and your demeanor is just very settling, so I appreciate that.
Oh,
but as you were speaking, I was just thinking of this little photon, going into the dark abyss, and sort of what you're saying, like, just complete darkness, and then you just look back and you see all the brilliant light that is the source of this, and this sort of anyway, different perspective. So that's it from me. I appreciate your words. And
thanks, man.
Yeah, others, please.
Can another Matt chime in?
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Sami. Gosh, I don't even know where to begin, but probably with gratitude for what you shared with us. I was so glad to see you last week at the party on Zoom.
That was great. It was after so long.
And the after party.
Yeah.
And because we've had conversations about these sorts of topics years ago, and
yep.
And I feel like I just got dropped right back into that space tonight, and it feels really good to be in that space. You and I used to kind of playfully like tussle with one another around, as I recall, issues of the one and the many, right? And listening to you speak, so you have a way of speaking confidently, but with humility, like at the same time, and lots of times when people who love to talk about God engage in that love, it depending on the degree of humility that I feel in the style and the way in which these words are conveyed. Sometimes I can be really put off, but other times I can be really drawn in and like, yes, let's talk about God. And the way you deliver your message is so trustworthy, in the sense that I feel it coming from your heart with plenty of intelligence and articulate precision, but from the heart primarily. And so I just feel so welcomed into the conversation rather than repelled, because there's lots of God talk these days. And often, at least in some of the more popular forms, there's the mystical forms, the more esoteric forms, and then there are these popular forms of God talk that tend to be divisive and judgmental and not loving. right?
Mm.
But so that's just all my way of saying thank you for exemplifying a more trustworthy, humble, inviting form of God talk, because we need to talk about it. We collectively need to talk about this.
Yeah.
So a question, I have to choose one. Freedom.
Yeah.
Nothing can occur that is not willed by the divine. It's one of the themes that you were sharing with us. And so I wonder about the place of individual freedom in that, because in one way, the divine, as you were saying, when before creation, right, is in this state of sadness and loneliness, and in creating a world is creating some kind of otherness, so that God can be reflected to God's self, but also so that these creatures can experience themselves, and in experiencing themselves often forget their divine source. But it wouldn't be real for God, and it wouldn't be real for the creatures either, unless there was freedom, right, in this play, in this drama, in this
Yep.
in this movie that's being filmed.
Yep.
And so how do you hold the two, the divine will as omnipotent, and the individual freedom of the creatures, which God needs to not be lonely? They need to be really free creatures who are, acting in the world.
Yep.
As individuals.
Well, that's the great mystery, But is that it, or did you want to?
That's probably as good as I can do to phrase the question. I think you get it. You seem to understand what I'm getting at. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's the question, right? Like how much is determined and how much is yet to be determined, or what is, it's like, and it's paradoxical, because I feel, and I feel that we are the ones who do the determining, as well as we are the ones who are determined as well, and Hafez talks about it, this article is incredible. You have to read this article, Matt, and recommend it to everyone. It's titled "The Visionary Topography of Hafez," and it's by Daryush Shaigan. I'll send it to you. And in it, the author of this article talks about how Hafez, the vision that he's holding and expressing, it's the origin is right here. And so, presence, when he is writing some of these verses, if he's writing from the point of view from the origin, like he is at that source. He's not just a witness at that source, but he's a participant in the whole act that gave rise to the universe. So even the creatures can access and can inhabit that space. And, it's almost like you transcend time. And it's not, there's a difference between being present, right, and being like at the beginning. Like you can be present to what's happening, but the deeper, I suppose, levels of that are, you could be right at the beginning, and you could be speaking from that place, and you could be expressing yourself from that place. So it's kind of, I think the poets, the mystics, each one of us has that capacity to access that. And I think when we are at that location and we are totally conscious, we are free, because we are the divine in those moments. But when we're in creation, most of the times we are unconscious. And so when we are unconscious, we are the ones who are determined. But when we are fully conscious, that's when we do the determining. And it's happening all at the same time, you know. It's like origin is right here, and that's what Gebser's work is, I think, about, right? That's why I put it in there, the ever-present origin. And the diaphaneity that he talks about, you know, this transparency, is if we can see everything as transparent to origin, you know, then we are at origin while being in, you know, while being here. Does that?
It makes sense for the creatures that their freedom is an expression of, to the extent that they can identify with God, they are free. But then I wonder about God's freedom, because a God before creation who is lonely seems somehow incomplete without creation, right?
Yeah, we've talked about this before, you know, and yeah, there is that. But as a creature, you know, as a creature, I think it's important to, you know, we're talking about God, which is none other than our true real self, right? Our fully conscious self. This is, you know, and so I always want to take the point of view of a kind of unconscious self, you know, who's aware that there's a conscious self, but I'm not going to speak from that consciousness, you know. That might happen, but as long as I'm speaking consciously, I will always speak from a place of the creature who is slightly unconscious, you know. So and so when I am thinking about the fully conscious part of me, that is not the part of me that is in need of anything, you know, because that's the fully conscious part. And so I'm focused more on my need in that sense, you know. But if I am in that space of being, you know, being with God, fully conscious, then maybe I can have a sense of my need, you know, and maybe we can discover that when we are there, you know, together. What was that need that gave rise to creation, you know? But while we are here, I think it's important. But having said that, Matt, you know, one of the things that really came to me in preparation for this is the whole idea of unrequited love, you know, and I think that is a place where I feel like it's not so much God's need, but it's like, you know, our love cannot match God's love for us, right? As creatures, you know. So there's a certain sense of unrequitedness, you know, in that God feels in relationship to us. And I think it's useful to think of that, you know, and to see things through that lens, you know, and to do, you know, not to do because, you know, but to respond, you know, to respond to that unrequitedness and to share in God's feeling of unrequited love, because we are that, you see, we experience that too. And that gives rise to a lot of inspiring things that humans have done and created and shared. It comes from a feeling of unrequited love, and that comes from a feeling of not being known. Because when you really know someone, you love them, right? I mean, so.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'll hold that and digest it and give the floor to whoever else wants to share something.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
It's nice to see you in the box.
Yeah, good to see you too.
I guess my interest is more of your personal relationship to Sufism, if you want to speak on that at all, and how long you've been studying or practicing, or, you know, what your, obviously this intimate relationship, this mystical union with the divine love and with God is part of your connection to the tradition, but just anything else that you'd like to share.
Thanks, Sarah. So yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family that has, you know, like two lineages of Sufism. You know, one is an established order, which is the Chishtiya lineage, you know, with Moinuddin Chishti, you know, of Ajmer. And then the other one is more of a sort of Owaisi type, you know, lineage coming from a man that my grandfather met in Bombay, on the streets of Bombay, and became his disciple, and then brought him to Pakistan, became his patron, and, you know, built a mausoleum for him after he passed away. And then, you know, we've been celebrating, the whole family has been celebrating his death anniversary every year. You know, that's what you do with Sufi saints, is the urs, you know, and so you celebrate the marriage of the saint with God. So I grew up in that kind of a, you know, milieu where, you know, all of this was happening, and there was a lot of, so the Chishtiyas, the way they connect with the divine, or the way they invoke, you know, a sense of the divine order, is through music and through poetry, and poetry set to music. And these were performed live, you know, when I was growing up, 4, 5, 6 times a year. And you know, it's like Qawwali, you know, if you've ever heard it, it's like, it really gets deep in your being, in your body, in your soul, in your heart. And I'm saturated with it because I've just been listening to it all my life. And that's the thing that makes me feel instantly connected, you know, it just like transports me and inspires me. So there's that. But I didn't really have a real appreciation for it, I suppose, when I was in my, you know, teenage years and then early years of college. I was, you know, scientific and all of that. And then when I met James Morris, you know, at college, and I started studying with him, I mean, everything just opened up. I mean, he's the one who opened me up completely to this world. And you know, to this day, he's my guide and inspiration, you know. I mean, he's really been present for me, you know, all these years. So yeah, I think that's, yeah, I mean, that's the basis of it. And then, you know, I wanted to share this, but I guess I could share it now. I mean, I don't know, you might have seen it on my Facebook, but there's a photograph of me when I was a kid. I was 1.5 years old, and there's a kind of spiritual being, or some kind of, you know, light, divine light, that kind of is captured in that photograph. And I discovered that when I came out of the hospital. I was hospitalized because I was going through a lot of intense spiritual experiences towards the end of my college years. You know, I was just completely immersed in mystical studies and love, and feeling all of this opening. And my family didn't quite understand what was happening. They just wanted me to get a job and get on with it. So yeah, and then I discovered this photograph, and it came to me, you know, as a tremendous reassurance. But it's a very intense photograph, because, you know, I've always known it's real, like there's an actual spirit in that photograph. But, you know, a lot of people have been hesitant, or, you know, not able to see it that way, and have been very skeptical. You know, not now. Those same skeptics are now like, oh my God, yeah, there's something there, you know. So so that's been an ongoing source of inspiration, because I think, and reassurance, right? Because yeah, I can't imagine going through everything that I've gone through without that sort of, you know, at the back of my mind, that, you know, I'm not crazy, you know, there's more to this than meets the eye, you know, there's a whole world behind the veil. And so, yeah, I think, you know, I've always maintained, because to me, it represents a miracle. And, you know, and that's how I want to see everything. I want to be invested in, you know, miracles happening everywhere. And so that's also, I think, part of my practice is to hold that, you know.
Sammy, you don't have to, but would you like to show that photograph if you don't mind?
Sure. I think I sent it to you.
I don't think you sent. Did you might have sent it?
I did send it, but let me see if I can. I can just do. Okay, here we go. Do you guys see it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Why don't I see it? Oh, here we go. Yeah, I mean, you guys might have seen this because it's posted on my Facebook, but I don't know how to.
Not the rabbit in the background. No.
I know, right? Isn't that crazy?
There he is.
It's beautiful, you know, because the photograph that I discovered 21 years ago. So I discovered this 21 years ago, you know, and at the time I'd only seen the actual physical photograph and not the scan of the negative. But when I discovered the negative in 2013, I saw the rabbit, and I thought that was really cute, you know, and I remember that rabbit. That's my rabbit right there. So anyway, what am I trying to do? Yeah, there we go. So you see, I mean, there's an actual, you know, there's an actual presence there, and there are eyes. Like, I don't know if you can see the pointer, but there's an eye right there, and there's an eye right here, and there's kind of flipped eyes in here. There's a whole tunnel of sorts here, you know, and you know, when I was reading up on you know, this ray of light that shot forth right, you know, at the beginning, this reminds me of that, you know. It's like it's a pale reflection of it. I mean, God forgive me for saying that, but you know, it's because it's in this, you know, it's in this material, dense material world. But it reminds me, it totally, completely reminded me of that, you know.
Yeah, even like your, you know, the motion of your hand, like you're conjuring.
Yeah, you know, I asked my dad about that, and he said, you know, I didn't tell you to do anything. You just put up your hand all by yourself, and then I just, you know, took the photograph. So yeah, and there's no other photograph of me like with those kind of blazing eyes, you know, and that kind of just open, you know, smiling, embodied, yeah.
Mhm.
So anyway, I'm gonna stop the share now, yeah?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah,
Mhm.
that was just such a beautiful image to see. Sam, did you have a question or comment, or were you just in?
Yeah, and just to let you
Sam!
know, my and hello, Sami, good to see you.
Good to see you.
My internet's been having some issues, so I hope I don't freeze for a bit. Let me know if I do. Just want to say first, you know, thanks for kind of bringing some Sufism in.
Yeah.
My interest has been sparked in it, you know, more recently, and I think that they've left us a real treasure and a real gift. You know, I think that times might come in life where you get swept into something that the Sufis will offer a lot of solace and guidance for. So, you know, we've had questions come in around justice and around freedom. in some ways, maybe this question would kind of be adjacent to or relate to them in certain ways. But I think my question relates to this idea of like dissension, you know, and like becoming in the world, and becoming as something, you know, that we also lean into. And as some of, you know, these ideas relate to that, and you know, all of my knowledge of Sufism so far is heavily mediated, necessarily. And you know, you brought in Corban, and
Yep.
you know, I'm this whole idea of like the angel out ahead, right? And to my understanding, you know, Neoplatonism and the kind of influence of Neoplatonism it really looms large in these kind of Sufistic cosmogonies, much of which are extremely beautiful. So you have, you know, this notion, you know, of epistrophe as the return, the kind of reabsorption to the one, to the origin, right? But how that idea later was sort of advanced as a more kind of specific hermeneutic, so that not only is there this kind of cosmological vision of return, but there is a sense of, you know, all the things in the world, like particular things can be led back to their origin, and that would be to lead them back to their archetype. Right.
Yep.
And Corban, looking at this in Ibn Arabi's work, is this idea of tawil, right? It's this hermeneutic exercise of leading things back to their origin. And yet for Corban, this is somehow wound up with that if we engage in this in the tawil, this exercise of kind of hermeneutic leading things back to their origin, this is somehow wound up with the angel out ahead, as he calls it, right? So there's this attractor of becoming that is a almost infinitely open horizon that is bound up with individuation, which is to say that we also have a karma here, right? That not only are we kind of anticipating this reabsorption, but in some ways really engaging in this exercise of return actually leads us forward, and that there's a liturgy of our becoming that is part of the emanation, that is affirmed. And so in some ways, this taking up the activity of the return in the world as we participate in it draws us forward. And there's an affirmation of the dissension, almost as infinite also. And so yeah, I'm just curious, like what you think of that, or like what your sense of individuation, or your sense of kind of becoming and having a sense of karma or destiny in the world is something that we move forward into, even in the midst of this vision of return.
Right. I mean, you know, so if you think of everything as being a divine name, right? That name, I think in Ibn Arabi's and Corban's angelology would be embodied in the form of the angel, right? Like the angel holds our identity and calls us to it, and our destiny is to be united with that, you know, the Lord, the angel, the celestial twin. You know, it's also, I think, akin to what Hillman calls the daemon, right? That keeps us on the path, that alerts us to, you know, the significant things that happen. And so, you know, I was a little confused when you were talking about the return and the forward movement. I mean, whichever way you look at it, it is a forward movement, even when it's a return, right? I mean, I mean, that's how I look, you know, that's how I see it as the angel is us, right? That's the form of us that is in the spiritual world. And that's that's our true beloved. It's kind of like the node of the divine, right? That each one of us is. And the whole process of going through the arc of descent and then the arc of ascent is to go far out, and then to come back to it. And to, and it's the names that are really yearning for recognition and reunification. And yeah, and I think when we can recognize that, then we can hold space for everything to experience that, and in doing that, we are, getting even closer, because ultimately, that's what individuation represents to me, is becoming who you already are, right? And if we think of our identity as not just the, being that's in the phenomenal world, but the one that is rooted in the spiritual, right? And like that was present right at the beginning, then a return to that would represent individuation, because you're becoming who you already are. Does that?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's
Yeah.
And yeah, there's this kind of paradoxical, or at least in my mind, it doesn't seem to me ring that way as much to you, but this image of the return, and yet this kind of forward attraction that lands us here. But yeah, I hear that in this vision, then the image is already given, so that becoming, if you're finding that image, is in a sense a return. Yeah, thanks, Sami.
Yeah, but I have a question, because there's the idea also of you said something about infinity, or and that maybe suggested something about it being open-ended, like our identities are still in a process of becoming, and it's like, are we going to just become what we already are, or are we going to become something that we've never been? Was that a question that you had?
I think the open-endedness is wrapped up in that paradox, in that, to my understanding, at least in certain angelologies, that even the angel out ahead has an angel out ahead, right? That it's angels opening to angels opening to angels, and this horizon has an infinite quality, that we're ever reaching to unite with that beloved, but there's always there's another beloved. It has this infinite horizon kind of quality to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's everything is a veil, like there's a deeper reality, but I think it does come to a conclusion at some point. It's not just an infinite thing. I see it more as a cyclical thing. You see, it comes to conclusion, it comes to fruition, and then it can begin again, and that's the place of absolute free will, and then, so when we are again unified, then I think that is the place where we can decide what the next adventure is, and that is what leads to an infinite becoming. But the cycles have to come to fruition, so it is an ongoing thing, but it's cyclical. So that's how I see it.
I like this conversation on individuation and completeness, because in the Jungian sense, individuation is this kind of like accomplishment of unification, of completeness. It's almost like something this beginning or the end, this point that we have to either come out of or come or end up at. And the little I know of Sufism is, I mean, just in the image of the dervish alone is such an integral, coalesced, mystical, not just tradition, but experience of consciousness. I mean, everything from geographically, from all of the places and traditions that kind of merge into it. Just in every way. I mean, it is like this perfect embodiment or manifestation of the Gebserian idea of this ever-present origin, which we can also call an ever-present, completeness almost. So it kind of reshapes the individuation, rather it being a point in time, the beginning or the end or both, it makes it really the entire process. It makes every single moment, every act, every thought, every feeling an individuated process if we do view it from that lens that every moment is complete, every moment is unified with divinity, and we can see it that way in a truly, or as close as we can get, non-dual type of way. It really just like makes the individuation process itself like a more beautiful concept, I think, than it being a goal. It's an actual presence. It is that ever presence.
I hear you. Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. Thanks, Sarah.
I feel like I'm like overheating even thinking about it. But I mean, that's part of the trick, right? Like being in this constant state. And again, to go back to this image of the dervish, like this constant state of awakening or union, to be able to hold that even. And I think that's where the task becomes tricky for us as finite beings that are so prone to multiplicity and chaos and distracted by so many things in the world, that just to even like have these moments of union and epiphany and awakening is can be annihilating. So to be able to find a tradition or a practice where you can do that in a manner where it's actually healing, and I want to believe, I don't know enough, but I would like to believe that the Sufi tradition offers that.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely does. But I think, all traditions offer it, when we can when we know how to look at them that way, or experience them that way. For example, Hinduism is about ritualizing, at least that's what came to me in thinking about this presentation, is about ritualizing the encounter with God. And a friend of mine, Mika, actually recently pointed that out to me, that, like even their weddings, the bride and the groom take on divine, form, like they are the divine, coming together, Shiva, Shakti, right? I think the more, what I'm really, wanting to do with this, and for the rest of my life, is to see more and more opportunities for us to talk about anything that happens with ourselves in our lives, but also what's happening out in the world, in terms of seeing the possibility for that hidden divine, to show itself to us in everything, especially in the forms that are difficult to behold in that way. But I think that's where they become really, that's where it becomes very powerful, if you can practice, just from a distance, all this noise that we constantly are bombarded with, practicing, this is all in process. It's all already perfect because it's held in divine love, but it's also in a process of becoming perfect, so it's both. And just because it is already perfect doesn't mean we can just sit back and not do anything, because then why else, we're here. So we obviously are meant to experience this ride and to see it also becoming perfect.
I'm back for more.
Yeah. Well, it's a small group now. Hi, Jacob. It's good to see you. You're still here.
Sami, I just recently had occasion to read the last book of the Bible, John's Apocalypse, Book of Revelation, and
Yeah.
it's there's a lot of divine wrath in that.
Yeah, I hear you.
And you know, there are other examples in the Old Testament of divine wrath, and I have not read much of the Quran at all, but I think there's violence in that book, right? And what is
violence? Wrath. Let's just say wrath.
wrath?
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one question would be distinguish the two, but my real question is about the extent to which, you know, history, human history as we understand it as finite beings, even if that understanding includes a relationship to God, there's a sense in which, at least for most of the exoteric monotheistic religions, and I mean to include Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, there's a sense in which history has fallen and that something needs to be restored.
Mm-hmm.
And in John's version of the story of restoration, there's a lot of the dispensation of justice requires, in a way, it seems to require a great deal of revenge. And only 144,000 or whatever that number is supposed to represent are saved, and everybody else is not.
So revenge on the part of God.
Divine vengeance.
Yeah, divine vengeance. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what's going on there?
I mean, how can you, I mean, I can just tell you what I think, obviously. I can't tell you what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Of course, I mean, I've struggled with the same, you know, kinds of passages, right? I mean, that's a lot. Like when I first started reading the Quran, those are the parts that just felt really difficult. You know, unbelievers will be sent to hell and there will be a torment and all of that. You know, so there are traditions in which you know, there's a Jewish tradition where some rabbi was asked, does God pray? You know, and the answer was, yeah, God prays. And he prays that his, you know, God says, may my mercy take precedence over my wrath. You know, in the Quran, it says God's mercy, you know, takes precedence over his wrath. Or no, sorry, it doesn't say that in the Quran. That's a saying attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, you know, who said that God's mercy takes precedence over his wrath. So the whole idea of wrath, right, is, the way I look at it is, it's there. And also another thing, some Sufis have commented, you know, again, 4 levels of interpretation. This goes back to hermeneutics and, you know, so there are some verses, and actually in the Quran itself, I came across this just recently, where God says that there are some verses that are ambiguous, you know. I'm going to have to share that at another point. But so the idea is that, of course, there's going to be mention of wrath, because again, that's part of the plot device that gets us out, you know, a maximum distance, because people also become agents of that, right? Like, and we have to, once, as long as we're in the arc of descent, that is something that we have to grapple with. And we are going to see expressions of that. We have seen expressions of that. You know, but it's not divine wrath that's directed at anything outside of the divine. It's the wrath that's it's directed at the divine itself. because that's what it did. That's the capacity of divine love, that it can take that upon itself, right? Why? Because it wants to go out and it wants to be known. And one of the things I guess it wants to be known for is its capacity to withstand this incredible suffering and pain. So I think I don't take it seriously in the sense that I don't think it points to a kind of absolute reality. I think, you know, we are in for a real surprise because, and people who believe in God's vengeance as a kind of real, you know, thing are projecting, right? I think, and I think it's natural for us to project on you know, onto it because it's there to be projected onto. It's there, right? And we don't need to do that much projecting because, you know, we've seen how things have played out. But I think the great surprise is, you know, that's why I like to talk about love, because, you know, as the basis of everything, and in a world like that, it doesn't make sense that there would be wrath, you know, on an absolute level. It would only make sense that wrath is also in service to love. And that's the great awakening, you know, that we need to come to, I think.
Sammy, maybe just one more question and then we can end the recording so it doesn't go on for 3 hours, but people can stay and ask questions as long as
Hamid is here, and who else is here?
Got Jacob.
Michael and Hamid and Jacob. And yeah, would love to hear from some of you guys if you're up for it. I guess not. That's okay.
Well, Sami, I'm curious with the process where you are in your dissertation. You know, you've talked so eloquently and with such authority, I think, and feel about God and about time and about, you know, the fulfillment of human destiny. And these are not small issues by any means. But I'm curious what you have left to research and kind of, you know, where is it just a matter of kind of writing this in a coherent way? Is this a small part, or is this, you know, what is left for you to do at your time in CIIS with regards to the research project as it, you know, becomes a kind of, you know, your soul as expressed in this dissertation?
Yeah, I like that. I think, you know, I initially began with the intention of bringing Jungian depth psychology into conversation with, you know, Sufi mysticism and the metaphysics of love, right? Because I feel like depth psychology doesn't really integrate the insights from mystical love. And it really takes this idea of shadow, I think, a little too seriously, you know, because from the perspective of the Sufis, this is God's shadow, like we're in it, you know? So the Jungian part is something that I still have some work to do, quite a bit of work actually. And, you know, yeah, just his, you know, the model of individuation. And so I still need to bring, you know, his ideas of this whole epochal turn into it. You know, I'm looking at Liz Green's, you know, writings about that, and was it Murray Stein, and a few others, but that's just where I've been lacking, and yeah.
And what part in particular? Is it with the boomerang? Is it
No, it's just I wanna understand how they interface, I really want to understand it, and I don't understand it. I don't think I do. I mean, I want to understand it in a way that is constructive, like that can really situate these ideas, in such a way that they can be mutually, enhancing, and that's challenging, because there's so much material, right? And and it's hard material to go through as well. I mean, I've done a lot of reading, but it doesn't really stick, because I don't want to carry it with me, I mean, because it's just because my inclination is towards, the love, and I don't find a lot of that in depth psychology. I mean, the Sufi mysticism is also a depth psychology, right? But it has different assumptions. And so maybe my focus will just be on that, and then I will, obviously refer to the Jungian, sort of, counterparts, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, does that?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I think I've been immersed in Jung for maybe too long. I don't know at this point, but Aeon is a really helpful book, I think, to bring a lot of this together.
Yeah.
And Michael is bringing up the book Existential Kink.
Look at that.
And also working with the shadow. So thank you.
Oh my God, there have been so many comments which I have not looked at.
No worries. He writes, you mentioned disturbing inner voices. Can we see these as representing rejected parts of the self or shadow, calling for recognition and love within the self? It seems
Absolutely.
to fit within your larger model,
Yeah.
in which there are many levels of God within veils.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, that's absolutely, yeah, that's how I look at them as well. Absolutely, yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you so much again, Sammy. I'm going to end the recording, and
Okay.
thank
Thank
you
you all
for watching.
Yeah.